The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, ZF, Continental Structural Plastics, and by Borg-Warner. Here's your host, John McElroy.
Welcome to the 2018 Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. We've got great panel discussions coming up for this year's show. We're going to be interviewing several executives from ZF. We've also got a panel that was organized by Mish Auto, which is part of the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we've got a panel organized by the Original Equipment Supplier Association. And of course, because we're on the floor of the show, you might hear all kinds of weird noises going on as all the traffic flows through here. So don't get too upset about what you might hear, except for when it comes to the conversation. And kicking off that conversation with me today is Peter Lake, member of the Board of Management for ZF. And Peter, it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the ZF stand.
It's great to be here. I'm intrigued by what's going on at ZF these days. You're a company that historically was always into transmissions. Now you're getting into a whole lot more than just that. Let's talk a little bit about the strategy of the company, the building blocks that you're putting in place, but let's kick off with how the whole ZF and TRW amalgamation is going.
Going very well indeed. I mean, the integration is substantially complete, but the strategy that you referred to really has its genesis going back 3 or 4 years ago in what was ZF at the time, pre-acquisition of TRW, where the leadership identified what the mega trends were in the industry in terms of efficiency and automated driving and integrated safety, and recognized that the company needed to make a substantial change in product portfolio to be able to address those mega trends. And the first step in that strategy was acquiring what was TRW, which gave a pretty substantial portfolio in the area of automated driving, driver assist systems, and of course active and passive safety. And then really what you've seen since then is a continuance of that strategy, really building block by block an ecosystem and also an organic growth strategy that enables us to deliver on the promise of see, think, and act. So this company is all about sensing the environment around the vehicle, seeing what's going on, thinking about that, whether that is AI enabled or not, and then acting, which is all about the actuators, and you see many of the smart actuators around the stand here today.
Where do you think this is all going to go for ZF then? I mean, you were always good at making hardware. You got TRW, that added a lot of electronics to it, but mobility services is something that the company is talking about. What's the vision for getting into that?
This whole area of digitalization fascinates us, and it's something that we need to build experience in, and so we're getting into the area of people movers and getting involved with companies like Ego in that.
What is Ego? I'm not familiar with that.
So in Germany, in University of Aachen is actually, or a professor from the University of Aachen is getting into this space of developing a people mover, and we're going to be providing the basic actuation and the sensor set which is going to be able to support this people mover, which ultimately may well become a cargo mover as well. And so there's a whole portfolio of development associated with that. And there are other things around the world that we're of a similar nature that we're getting involved in. And it's really all about, I guess, learning and understanding what the new market opportunities may well be in this space.
Yeah, Peter, where do you think it's going to go, in the sense that when you look at some of the ride-sharing companies that are out there, Uber and Lyft in the US, Didi in China, Ola in India, it goes on and on. How much do you think of the public is going to switch over to ride-hailing rather than just owning a car?
Well, you know what, I don't know what the lead time is on crystal balls, because that's a pretty profound question. I mean, if you believe the pundits, then certainly it's going to be a very significant market. And we're going to see a bifurcation in this market. We're going to see, I think, ride-hailing services and people mover type services really moving quickly into e-mobility and into higher levels of automated driving. And then we're going to see the mass market moving a little bit more conservatively, moving maybe to level 2, level 3 plus type automation levels to a slightly longer time scale. And so it's going to be fascinating how much it actually turns out at the end of the day. The business case is always a tough one when you get into level 4, level 5, but I think that there's an inevitability associated with it, and so you have to be prepared as a supplier of a tier 1 supplier such as we are. We need to be investing heavily in this space.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts of getting ZF involved in level 4 and level 5 autonomy? I'm sure you see a role for the company to play.
Oh, absolutely, and I mean, the market is somewhat uncertain at this point in time. I don't think anyone has that crystal ball that I referred to, and a lot of the companies that were making bold statements even 18 months ago, I think are perhaps going a little bit more slowly than they were previously. But as I say, there's an inevitability associated with it, and as a tier 1 supplier and a significant leader in this space, we really need to be investing in what it takes to deliver level 4 and level 5, even if the market for that is going to be somewhat restricted, perhaps geo-fenced areas, fairly limited business cases in the short term, but the long term it's coming.
I like what you're talking about because there has been so much hype in this, and I love when you bring up the case, making the business case for it. So you got to be able to make money on this or no one's going to go anywhere with it.
Well, I mean, it's got to make sense to our customer, the vehicle manufacturer, and ultimately it has to make sense to his customer. So if you're talking about the cost associated with level 4, level 5 compared to level 2, level 3, it's an order of magnitude difference. And okay, you got to think about the value that the end user is going to be prepared to pay the vehicle manufacturer. Once you get outside of this area of people movers and mobility services, which is a different business case.
Yeah. Look, it's great to talk all about mobility, autonomy, and the like because it's so much fun. And like you said, nobody really knows where it's going. But in the meantime, you make a lot of real-world componentry that's going to be in production for an awful long time. And I got to believe that you're still going to invest in that part of the business.
Absolutely, investing very heavily. I mean, we continue to increase our R&D expenditures in absolute terms and as a percentage of sales. And yes, a lot of that is going into future-proofing our basic actuator products. We use the phrase intelligent mechanics because steering systems, braking systems, airbag and seatbelt systems need to get increasingly intelligent in of themselves to be able to meet the future market requirements, but particularly so on steroids when you talk about automated driving.
Mm-hmm. And I got to believe too, you're still involved in conventional powertrains, and that's probably not going to change a whole lot, certainly not in the next decade.
No, I mean, the view we have is that e-mobility is coming, it definitely is coming, but there are so many scenarios that you can actually work through, and our view is we need to have a robust portfolio that is flexible and modular and can support all of the options that are available in powertrain technology rather than just making a bet on one. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Mm-hmm. But you are playing a role in electrification?
Absolutely. I mean, this company has been involved in, for example, hybrid technology going back more than a decade when those products launched, and whether it's integrated starter generators, 48 volt, or whether it's hybrids, or whether it's full battery electric type technologies, then we have them.
Yeah. We ought to establish for some of the viewers who may not be familiar, just what is the size of ZF these days? What's your global footprint like, revenue, employment, and the like? Well, you're a very significant player, but I want you to tell that story.
It is, absolutely, and so something like $43 billion in revenues, something like 135,000 people worldwide. We operate in pretty much everywhere that a vehicle is manufactured, and not just in terms of manufacturing, but particularly so in engineering. We have engineering centers all around the world, continuing to invest very heavily in engineering centers and new ones, whether it be software engineering centers down in Hyderabad or whether it be new investments in China or in Japan. Big footprint, big manufacturing footprint.
What, you must be one of the top 5 automotive suppliers, maybe?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the exchange rate, on the dollar-euro at any point in time, but yeah, we're up there, top 3, top 4, whatever. And you've got to be big if you're going to make the sort of
You need
investments.
scale.
You absolutely.
And you've got to have the money to
absolutely.
make the R&D investment.
And you know, you kind of wonder about the industry because everyone is getting into some area of these new mega trends, but who is going to actually be able to stay the course?
Yeah.
And you know what? You've got to be big to be able to stay the course. It's as simple as that.
It is as simple as that. Peter Lake, what a pleasure talking with you. Very interesting.
very much
Thank you
indeed.
for your time today. It was
Appreciate
excellent.
it. Bye-bye now.
Stay tuned, folks. We've got a lot more coming up for you with the Autoline Supplier Symposium.
ZF is on the road to Vision Zero, pursuing a world of mobility without accidents and emissions. The company's broad product portfolio allows vehicles to see, think, and act, assisting in protecting drivers on their journey, while protecting the environment as well. With its eyes squarely on the future, ZF is helping to shape a world that is increasingly electrified, digital, and autonomous.
BorgWarner, developing advanced technology specifically aimed at reducing emissions, increasing fuel economy, and improving performance. Our award-winning innovations extend from turbocharging and cooling systems to friction materials and diesel cold start technology. Built on a century-long reputation of innovation and reliability, we have the track record that proves our technology can help meet the challenges of the commercial truck and off-highway industry.
We're back with the Autoline Supplier Symposium coming to you from the floor of the North American International Auto Show. As I mentioned before, if you hear weird noises, you see people walking around, hey, that's what happens at an auto show. But right now we're going to get into a great discussion, a panel discussion that was organized by the Original Equipment Supplier Association. And joining us for that panel are Karen Manardo, who is the Global Director of Marketing and Communications at Inteva Products. Rob Wildeboer is the Executive Chairman and Co-Founder of Martinrea International Inc. And Ann Wilson is the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at the Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association. And it's great to have all three of you here.
Great to be here.
And look, what we got to talk about here is one of the most important topics going on in the automotive industry right now, and that's what is going to happen with Nafta, the North American Free Trade Agreement. There's all kinds of buzz going on in Washington. It's a critically important agreement for the auto industry. And why don't we start with you? You're based in Washington. Mm-hmm. What the heck is going on there? What's your outlook?
Well, you know, the president reopened the Nafta negotiations with Mexico and Canada earlier in 2017, and he's really very focused on trade deficits and is very concerned about the trade deficits with Canada and Mexico. We don't quite see it that way. As an industry, as a supplier industry particularly, the trade is pretty much balanced overall between the NAFTA countries. And also, you know, it has been, NAFTA's been good for the auto industry, but it's also been good for the American worker. You know, our jobs are increasing in the United States. They're good jobs. We have welcomed the opportunity to update NAFTA, but we are very concerned about not doing any harm. The next round of negotiations start next week in Montreal. It's a critical time. The president has signaled that he is willing to issue a withdrawal notice, which is a 6-month withdrawal notice, which would be detrimental to this industry. And we are working very hard for him to see that's not an avenue that we need to take. We need to stay at the table, keep negotiating, keep updating in a positive way.
Rob, is that how you see it, that this would be detrimental?
Yeah, I think so. We're a Canadian-based supplier, but we've invested a lot in the United States. Just to give you a sense, we have 2,500 employees in Canada. We have 5,000 in the United States. We have 5,000 in Mexico. We're a North American supplier, and we've invested heavily in all the regions in order to service our customers to the best of our ability. And I think we're probably very well positioned to deal with whatever the NAFTA results are, because a lot of our product goes directly to the customer. Having said that, North America is very competitive. It's competitive because of its supply chain. The problem with screwing with the supply chain is it will add cost. If it adds cost, it's going to add price to the vehicles that are sold. If price goes up, consumers are going to buy less. If consumers buy less, there will be less produced, and jobs are going to be lost. And because of the interrelated nature of the industry, a lot of those jobs are going to be in the United States, including places like Michigan and Ohio and those types of states that supported the president in terms of the last election. So I think, why would you screw with that? We are very competitive to the rest of the world. North America exports about 2 to 2.5 million vehicles outside of North America. It's going up to 4. We've got to compete with China and Asia. We've got to compete with Europe. I think NAFTA's been a good thing, and I think you want to improve a good thing.
Okay, Karen, what's Inteva's position on this?
So when NAFTA was established, the whole spirit behind it was that it would lift all boats, right? And honestly, that's what's happened. Inteva Products is based in Michigan. We're based in Troy. That's where our global headquarters is. We also have locations in Mexico. We have locations in Canada. The vast majority of the business that we do, we serve those customers in those regions. And that's just a smart way of doing business for anybody globally. When we grow in Mexico, we're growing with a North American program perhaps. We've added jobs in Michigan. We've invested in Michigan. We've invested in Ohio. You know, you invest where you need to invest to grow the business.
So you've invested in Mexico too, though, right?
We've also invested in Mexico because we have business there as well, and that's smart business. We have to do what's smart. We've got to keep that cost down, as Rob was talking about. We don't want to see that cost get passed along to the consumers anymore, and we're in America. We like American jobs. We want more American jobs, of course. We want more U.S. jobs, but where we need the jobs also might be Mexico, it might be in Canada, and we need that flexibility that that NAFTA provides. There's probably room for modernizing that law. Everybody agrees that there's room for that, but withdrawing would create a lot of issues in terms of jobs moving out and also the cost. So we're definitely pushing folks to make sure that we don't withdraw.
But you know what they were just both saying about jobs, it's important to realize in the last 5 years, we have grown more as a manufacturing sector than any other, for jobs, in the United States, than any other manufacturing sector in this country. In the OE automotive supplier industry, more than 21%. That's a huge growth, and a lot of it has to do with the technology you're seeing on the show floor. And that's what we need to really encourage, to have more of those jobs. But we depend on having an economic base of Mexico, Canada, and the United States, where we can have lower cost labor, because that's what they have in Europe, for Eastern Europe. That's what they have in Japan and other places in Asia. So for our country to be globally competitive and our industry to be globally competitive, we need NAFTA to work for all parties. It has been, and that's what we want to continue to see happen.
Rob, you were going to add?
Yeah, I think the position of the U.S. administration has in essence been a solution looking for a problem. And, and you know, the reality is, I find it ironic, as a Canadian supplier, as a U.S. supplier, and as a Mexican supplier, that the people that are making the argument on behalf of the industry are the OEMs, the suppliers, the state governors, MEMA, OESA, the Canadian government, the Mexican government. So, you know, ultimately we have to get the message across. I think that the message probably has to be in the White House. And I think the discussion is, you know, what's the problem that you're trying to look for? And at the end of the day, I'm trying to think about, how does this work for the president who wants to make America great again? I think you make America great again by strengthening what is probably your largest and most important manufacturing industry, so it can compete with and win against the rest of the world. And that's what a modernized NAFTA would do. And we see that as a supplier that, you know, is bringing new technologies to the market every day.
You all make very compelling arguments, but as you all know, this president got elected with NAFTA being one of his major planks. And the perception out there for a lot of the population is that the U.S., especially in manufacturing, has lost jobs to Mexico. How do you explain to these people why staying in NAFTA is a benefit?
Well, we've been working with the governors, and it's real interesting when you start talking to governors, because governors have really invested in companies, like all of our members, like all the members here, in trying to make sure that they have the right training, the right resources to locate facilities in their states. And a lot of the governors in states where the president won have really been instrumental in talking to the White House about, look, let me tell you on a very personal level how this has worked for my state, you know, about the jobs that the suppliers in the auto industry have brought into this state. And We also are very concerned about what we see as a need for new employment in the U.S. But if you talk to most of our members, they say, we need our trained people. And what we've been talking to the administration about is the ways that we can add something in NAFTA that gives incentive for training programs, that gives incentives for having, training programs that the states can provide to folks. Because we can understand this. People want good jobs, but this is an industry that actually is providing them. We don't want to lose those jobs. What we need to do is grow on the success we've had.
Yeah, and Karen, what do you think? I mean, how do you overcome this perception?
Yeah, the perception, we need to get the word out as industry leaders, as organizations that really do understand that the automotive industry is global. We need to get the word out about how that operates in a global economy, because automotive is a global business. You can't regionalize and expect to not see the impact on the costs. With the investment in training, incentives for training, that would be the right way to amend NAFTA. That would be a positive move to improve the global economy as we see it related to automotive. Moving ahead with regional value content, 85% now figured out, is not the way to do it. We get asked frequently now by the OEMs, what would the impact be? Can you do this, is the first question. Of course we can. We can do that. What would that mean for our supply chains? What would that mean for the price? What would that mean for ultimately our workforce? Those are the questions we haven't been asked, and we need to be a lot more vocal about that. And Anne's been encouraging us all to do that as an organization. So
yeah, Rob, I want to get your input.
Yeah, numbers can be interpreted many different ways. The fact is, a number of jobs have been lost in the United States and in Canada. A lot of it had to do with technology. Those jobs aren't coming back, but a lot of new jobs have been created also because of technology. Look at all the wonderful technologies that we're seeing at the auto show and all the people that are working on that basis. The other thing is, a lot of the growth in Mexico has been investments from other people in the world. It's the Asians, or the new domestics as they call them, or Europeans, basically putting up plants in Mexico. When they put up plants in Mexico, we as suppliers make parts for those plants. And when they export it or whatever, that's good for us. The other thing is that a lot of plants in Mexico are owned by U.S. interests and so forth. They're making more parts also. And so in that sense, I think it goes back to what Karen said about a win-win-win. The fact is that overall automotive jobs have increased over the last 5 years. You can pick your various time frames. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to look at the overall numbers. This is an evolving industry. It's an exciting industry. It's a high technology industry, and we're attracting the best and brightest effectively, in part because we have a leading edge industry. If we effectively go protectionist or hurt the cost base or effectively make it less of appealing as an industry, it's going to hurt us all, and that's not a good thing.
We actually had a study that we worked with Boston Consulting Group on earlier this year, and it said if you really change the rules of origin, which are the tools that we've kind of been talking about, or if you did away with NAFTA overall, that the supplier industry alone could lose about 50,000 jobs. Now keep in mind that every one of our jobs creates another 5 jobs. So at a minimum, we're talking about 250,000 jobs. Now we're talking about jobs in other industries. This is just the auto industry. And actually we also think that number's kind of low, because then you start really looking at the tier 2, tier 3 jobs that are out there. That's a lot of jobs. So what people need to understand is, we understand about training, we understand about the need to bring new people into the workforce. Those are all things that we totally agree with the president on and want to work with him on those things. But at the same time, you can't get the flour back in the bag. And NAFTA works well for this industry. We need to build on its success.
Right. You've all talked about, you do agree that this agreement can be modernized. What would you like to see? Karen, let's start with you.
Incentives for training, incentive for investing in your local talent to develop those kind of technology skills that we need now today in the automotive industry, even more so than ever.
But is that part of the NAFTA agreement?
I think incentives for local training could be something that gets built in to what we're incentivizing our North American and our US companies to do. I would definitely push for something like that.
Streamlining cross-border movement of people and of resources, I think the infrastructure and so forth could really help. I think there's a lot that can be done there. I also think that modernizing the agreement, recognizing 25 years ago the categories of rules of origin, which I believe included cassette players, which no longer exist, should be updated. And I think there's tremendous opportunity to in effect do that. But you know, if you have an open region, encourage the openness, then I think we can compete better with the rest of the world. And to me, that's an attitudinal thing as well. The other thing is that from a personal perspective, as a leader of our company, I have 5,000 U.S. employees. I want to maintain and grow their jobs, and I want to do the same with the 5,000 people that we employ in Mexico, and I want to do the same with the 2,500 people that we employ in Canada. And so, as I look at this, it's very personal, which is basically we're protecting our people. If the administration is saying they're protecting Americans' jobs, I'm protecting American jobs, and so in that sense, I think that we know pretty well what's going to increase employment or what's going to decrease employment in our industry.
And what are your thoughts? What should be modernized?
Well, there's a lot we can modernize. I mean, it is true. It's a 25-year-old agreement. We didn't use, email the way we do now. There's ways that we can help with the cross-border traffic. There's ways that we should be incentivizing training. We'd also like to see some credit for research and development, software development. I mean, these are things that we make right now in the U.S. And let's give credit for that so that we can have more of those jobs and drive those jobs here. And we see that as an opportunity to really drive job growth too in the United States.
Okay, I'm going to put each of you a little bit on the spot right now. We're down to the last minute of the show. What's going to happen? I mean, we've seen Ford move heavy truck production out of Mexico to the United States. I think FCA just announced they're moving heavy truck production out of Mexico into the United States. Mary Barra, on the other hand, said, hey, we're going to keep building trucks in Mexico. We think NAFTA is not going away. Karen, what do you think?
I think there'll be some modernizing. There won't be a withdrawal.
Okay.
The modernizing may require some changes in our supply base, but hopefully not to the drastic extent that people have been speculating about.
Gotcha. Rob?
There's two things that no one should be subjected to. One is viewing trade agreements being negotiated. The other is the making of sausage. And I think that we're going to be subjected to a lot of toing and froing. I think ultimately something is going to happen where the basic structure of NAFTA will be preserved. Whether it's in NAFTA or in bilateral agreements or whatever, it certainly makes no sense to kill it.
Yeah. Okay, and Ann?
I think that we have a really good chance to keep everybody at the table and come up with a modernized NAFTA. I think people are going to come into Montreal next week with ideas and ways to move this forward. We've got some hurdles in front of us, and to get there, not just this auto rules, but other agreements and things that have been put on the table. But I think we've got a real good opportunity here. And I think what's most important is this industry, the automotive manufacturers, suppliers, the dealers, we are all united in our message. Stay at the table, let's get a good agreement going, let's continue to grow jobs and grow prosperity for everybody.
Well, good. With that, we're going to have to wrap it all up.
All right.
Karen Manardo, Rob Wildeboer, Ann Wilson, thank you for your insight on where NAFTA is going to go.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. And don't forget to keep tuning in. We've got a lot more coming for the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the North American International Auto Show.
The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, ZF, Continental Structural Plastics, and by Borg Warner.